Bohdan Nahaylo. He's the chief editor of the Kyiv Post and joins us from Barcelona. Welcome back to the program, Bohdan. As we heard there, Ukraine says it won't surrender Mariupol to the Russians, and that's despite some estimates saying that some 90% of the city has now been destroyed by Russia's assault. Why is Moscow so determined to hold on to capture Mariupol, do you think?
Well, there's an obvious reason. It's the main port on the Sea of Azov, and it was formerly, before 2014, the port through which coal from the areas now occupied since 2014 by the Russians was exported. It's also a major staging area on the way to Crimea. It's part of that land corridor over the north of the Sea of Azov, which would link Russia proper with Crimea and perhaps open a doorway to Odessa further west.
Now, the US president is due to travel to Brussels and Poland this week in a show of support for Ukraine and countries in the region that are dealing with the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding. What would you like to see from Joe Biden's trip? And are the US, NATO and EU doing enough for Ukraine in your view?
Ukrainians don't think that enough is being done for them. They realize that, nobody, including the Ukrainians, want to risk a third world war, but they also realize that there's a lot of extreme brinkmanship in Putin's brandishing of the nuclear threat as the ultimate weapon and argument. I think even if closing the skies with planes is not feasible, closing the sky with more sophisticated weapons of the sort of like the Javelin or Stingers and others that the Brits and the Swedes and others are providing or have promised to provide, that would be very important. Plus, to open up some kind of corridors to ensure that this aid comes in, and on the other hand, that people can be evacuated. The tragedy is not only that there is this asymmetric bombardment, ruthless killing and destruction of cities that's going on as the West, as the outside world watches with horror, but that so little is being done to stop it. Putin seems to be oblivious to diplomatic implorations that he stop this barbarity. And therefore, I think a tougher stance is needed, whether it's even tougher sanctions or to split Russian society and split the leadership in Moscow and therefore help to get rid of Putin. Something desperately needs to be done because, to conclude my thoughts, the Ukrainians aren't about to give in and capitulate. They're they're horrified by what's happened, and they will fight to the bitter end, whatever that means, hopefully for victory when waiting for Russia to collapse, implode, though that's going to take a long time. But they certainly won't give up. And if even some of the bigger cities are taken or sections of the city, there will be partisan warfare, which will go on for ages.
Yes, and one of those cities that's reportedly in Russia's sights is Kiev. A report by British intelligence concludes that despite the lack of progress by Russian troops, Kiev remains Russia's primary military objective, and they're likely to prioritize attempting to encircle the city over the coming weeks. Do you believe Ukrainian forces can continue to defend the capital?
Look, from the latest information coming from Kyiv and from what the Ukrainian military are saying, they feel that the Russians have changed tactics in the last 48 hours. They are besieging Kyiv. They would very much like to take it eventually so as to decapitate the country, get rid of the political leadership, get rid of Zelenskyy and the elected leadership. But what they seem to be doing is digging in all around the capital, in most areas, and going in for a long siege of the sort that we saw in Stalingrad in World War II. But stepping up their efforts to take Kharkiv and Mariupol, meaning the east and south of the country, so that if any deal was to be cut, eventually they would say, well, we're here, we're staying here, we're going to take the second largest city, Kharkiv, if it ever falls to them, and Mariupol, the port, and therefore, carve up the country, take half of it, take the eastern part for itself. Because Russians from history, once they're in, you can't get them out unless they implode themselves, as happened in 1991.
Okay, Bohdan Nahaylo, we will have to leave it there, but thank you as always for joining us on TRT World.